platform that speaks more to concentrated executive authority than actually some of the matters that you want to discuss. Now you're getting, how do you separate yourself from people who believe that's what conservatism is now? Things like Project 2025.
Well, we don't have a platform, and we recognize that historically in the Republican Party, all kinds of people have had different views on all kinds of important issues. But there have been certain principles that are broader than particular issues where every Republican has agreed, and they don't anymore. This has been turned on its head. Just give you one example. America's involvement in the world, peace through strength. We had a majority of Republican members of the House of Representatives who voted against aid to Ukraine. Back in the very near future, past, no Republican would have voted against aid to Ukraine. I mean, we tried isolationism as in our country in the 1930s, and it didn't work out very well. Now, Republicans are saying, in essence, okay, Mr. Putin, take it. If you want Ukraine, it's yours. We're not going to fight back. And Trump has said that he would invite Putin to invade NATO countries. Can you imagine Ronald Reagan saying that? I mean, we've gone from Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, to Mr. Putin, have at it. It's a total reversal of what the Republican Party was. So I don't think there's a lack of clarity in what these people are about. I think they're very clear. It's high tariffs. It's big government. It's convening a group to come to Washington and inciting them to attack the Capitol. They have been very clear in what they're doing. If it had been just sort of lack of clarity, okay, so that's fine. But no, this is, and it's not just different from the traditional Republican Party, it's contrary to what the Republican Party has been and what it should be in the future.
Well, I appreciate the thought that you put into this and having this discussion. Charlie, you know I like nothing more than actual policy discussions than just the hope that we'll get to it. So I appreciate that maybe you're headed in that direction. Former Republican Senator John Danforth of Missouri is the co-founder of our Republican Legacy, and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania is the senior advisor to our Republican Legacy and the executive director and vice president of the congressional program at the Aspen Institute. Stayed ahead, the Supreme Court, Donald Trump, and our American crisis. Why the upside-down American flag, which flew at a Supreme Court justice's house immediately after the January 6th insurrection, was not an accident, but a symbolic message to America and Trump's followers. What it means for Trump's multiple legal cases and the future of our democracy on another hour of Velshi, which begins right now. Good morning. It's Saturday, May 18th. We begin this morning with a stunning new revelation that has revived concerns of the ethical standards of one of America's most important institutions, the Supreme Court. This week, the New York Times published a report that casts fresh doubt about the impartiality of a second Supreme Court justice, possibly linked to the politics of January 6th. The report was published as the country awaits a pair of decisions from the High Court that could have an impact on January 6th related prosecutions, including the federal election interference case against the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump. Central to the Times reporting is a photograph of this, an upside-down American flag on a residential property owned by the Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. Historically, flying the flag upside down has been known as a signal of distress. Sailors at sea understood this as a sign of an emergency. It's since been co-opted as a political symbol for a variety of causes and protest movements, a symbol that indicates deep disapproval of a particular issue or of a particular politician. In the 60s and 70s, flags were flown upside down by those protesting the Vietnam War. For some Tea Party conservatives in 2012, it was a symbol of opposition to Barack Obama's re-election victory. We saw it again more recently in the summer of 2022 as people came out to protest the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the opinion for which was written by Justice Samuel Alito. But in the wake of the 2020 presidential election, as it became clear that Joe Biden had won the race and Trump launched his campaign of lies in an effort to overturn those results, an upside-down flag was largely understood as a symbol of opposition to Biden. Online, Trump supporters encouraged people to display flags in that manner to protest the election or the outcome of the election. On one pro-Trump forum, a poster wrote, quote, "If January 6 rolls around and Biden is confirmed by the Electoral College, our nation is in distress. If you cannot go to the D.C. rally, then you must do your duty and show your support for our president by flying the flag upside down." And on January 6, the Associated Press photographed at least one rioter waving an inverted flag on the steps of the Capitol. According to the Times, the newly surfaced photo of Alito's residence was taken on January the 17th, 2021, in the days between the insurrection and Biden's inauguration. It was taken by one of Alito's neighbors, and other residents corroborated that the flag was displayed that way for an unspecified number of days. Meanwhile, during the same time period at the Supreme Court, those justices were deciding whether to take up a case brought by Trump allies challenging Pennsylvania's mail-in voting system, a case that could have had implications for the outcome of the election. Alito, by the way, was in favor of reviewing that case, but the majority decided against it. Now, when this story first came out earlier this week, I wanted to treat it with a healthy dose of skepticism, because to me it seemed too outrageous to be true that a member of the Supreme Court would be so brazen or foolish or neglectful as to allow a political symbol to be displayed at his home so openly. I waited for some plausible reason, and yet that's exactly what seems to have been the case. In his emailed statement to the New York Times, Alito wrote, quote, "I had no involvement whatsoever in flying the flag. It was briefly placed by Mrs. Alito in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs," end quote. Notably, Justice Alito does not dispute that the flag on his property was flown upside down during the time period in question, nor does he dispute the commonly understood symbolism of an upside-down flag, nor does he disavow or acknowledge or express regret that it has been perceived negatively in such a way that it tarnishes the reputation of the Supreme Court. Instead, he just blames his wife. Alito's predicament is in addition to the ethical concerns surrounding Clarence Thomas, whose wife Ginny has been scrutinized for her political activities. She admitted to attending the rally at the Ellipse on January 6th, and it was revealed that in the days after the election, she was in contact with John Eastman, one of the architects of the fake electors scheme, who's now facing criminal charges. Besides that, recent reports have raised additional questions about both justices' links to billionaire conservative donors and their history of accepting gifts and luxury trips from them. Their actions, as well as their apparent lack of concern over the impropriety of their actions, have contributed to the decline of public trust in the Supreme Court. And this is all playing out against the backdrop of an incredibly important election that the court has already influenced in some ways. Its highly criticized decision to hear Trump's case regarding presidential immunity means that the ex-president's federal election interference case is unlikely to proceed to trial before November. Given all that we know, unlikely to proceed to trial before November. Given all that we know about the conduct of some of the justices, every American citizen will have reason to doubt the fairness of the court's decisions on matters related to the insurrection of the former president. Joining me now is Elie Mystal, justice correspondent and columnist for The Nation, a fellow at the Type Media Center and author of the book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Joining us as well as Jennifer Rubin. She's an opinion writer for The Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst and author of Resistance, How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump. Good morning to you both. I will freely admit to being the dupe in this crowd because I'm the guy who said to my executive producer, there's got to be more to this story. Give him a minute, Elie, and Alito's going to come out with something that explains reasonably why he had an upside-down flag at his house. And guess what? I was wrong.
Yeah, the reason why he had the upside-down flag at his house is because he supports the insurrection. And I knew that before the flag story. I knew that Clarence Thomas supported the insurrection before I knew about Jenny Thomas's involvement, because you read their opinions. You read what they say. You listen to what they say at oral arguments, and they've already told you what they're about. They've already told you that they are MAGA-aligned, pro-Trump insurrectionists, and the proof of all that is not actually in the flag story or the email story or whatever. It's in their written opinions. It's in what they've done for Trump since he launched his insurrection, which is do everything in their supreme power possible to make sure Trump evades prosecution and accountability for his crimes. That's what they are, folks. That's what they've always been. And the question at some point becomes not who are these people, because we know who these people are. It's what are the rest of us going to do about it? And what are the rest of us willing to do to stop them?
Right. And as it relates to the Supreme Court, Jen, our options, i.e. the options of the rest of us, are relatively limited and at the moment seem to involve either protest or making sure that the Supreme Court is one of the reasons you vote whatever way you're going to vote in November. But short of that, what else can be done? Because as we've learned from the Supreme Court, nobody's the boss of them.
Well, 2 points. First of all, he went to Fox News to dispute this. Consider that.
Yes.
He goes to the outlet that is the propaganda mouthpiece that made up and ran with and ultimately had to pay a huge verdict for lies about the election of 2020. So put a pin in that. Secondly, it's not just that he was aligning with Trump. It's that he's aligning with a group that is considering, that is doing the work of overthrowing the Constitution. That's a clear violation of his oath. It's not as if he had a Trump sign, go Trump. He has a down with the Constitution sign, essentially, flying over his house. So what do? Well, first of all, Dick Durbin's got to get off his duff. He has been sitting around twiddling his thumbs on any kind of mandatory ethics reform. It needs to be on the floor of the Senate on Monday. Put it to the House and let them decide that they don't want to improve the Supreme Court. Secondly, there should be an impeachment inquiry. There's no excuse for it. Understand that while this was going on, Sidney Powell and her pack of malpracticing unethical lawyers were concocting a plot to have Alito intervene in the election count. That was their scheme. We have tape of Sidney Powell saying, yes, that was the scheme to get Alito into this. If that's not grounds for an impeachment proceedings, I don't know what is. Third, this is not just an Alito and a Thomas problem. This is a Chief Justice Roberts problem. He is complicit in this. He has the choice. He can go public if need be. He can demand these people recuse himself. He can go to Congress and ask for a mandatory ethics regime, but he has it because he is weak, because he wants to allow the conservative majority to remain so he can advance whatever political views he has. He is complicit in all of this. Ultimately, what we need is investigation. We need court reform. We need Democrats in this election to elevate court reform, come out in favor of not only term limits, but in my book, at this point, we need court expansion. So there's lots of things to be doing, but we cannot do them if people like Dick Durbin sit around and say, oh, please, Mr. Alito, would you recuse yourself? That's not going to get the job done, and Democrats shouldn't tolerate that kind of mamsy-pamsy approach.
Can I add one more thing on Roberts? Because Roberts doesn't have a lot of hard power, but he has a lot of soft power over these people. And one of the tools in his bag that he refuses to use is that there is no reason Sam Alito or Clarence Thomas should be allowed to write majority opinions. That decision is Roberts, right? And he could assign. There's no reason Alito had to write the overturning Roe v. Wade decision. There's no reason Thomas has to write the guns decision. He can take those cases away from the men who are complicit, away from the men who are corrupted, and at least give them to Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, she's sitting right there, right? She's got she's got her pens ready for action, right? So there are a lot of ways besides, in addition to speaking out and saying something about the court that he will be pinned to for the rest of his legacy. there are soft things that Roberts could be doing to rein these people in that he's not. But I totally agree with Jen. I mean, at some point, the Democrats just there needs to be a bill on the floor. When I come on a segment like this, Allie, I need to be able to point and say, like, look, everybody, we need to vote for Ethics Reform Bill 1827.